I'm Clint, and welcome to Swatches Art Livestream number 92. We're going to be taking a look at the art challenge entries for the finals of Group 1 on the One Punch Man Ancient Space Art Challenge. I'm once again joined by Anna, our moderator. Anna, how's it going?
Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great day.
Yeah, see, now this one, you're not in this one, are you, Anna?
No, I'm not participating this time.
No, but we've both had a chance to take a look at the entries, and we've jotted down notes. We haven't really compared notes, so it'll be new observations from both of us to hear from each other. And we also want to cover a couple of just general announcements of what's going on in the Swatches community. While we're giving people a couple of minutes here to join in live. Now, of course, if you do have a comment or question that you want to toss to us during the live stream, feel free to put that there in the chat. Make sure that you mention swatches in your comment so it's flagged in orange for me. It's much easier for me to see it. Okay, so a couple of things going on. If you've not been around for a while, or if you're new, then you might want to be aware that we have channel memberships going on, and there is also a weekly members only paint over live stream. So those at the second tier, are referred to as the Super Swatcher tier, can join in the Paint Over live stream. This is a little cover from the last Paint Over live stream that we had on Wednesdays. It is the same time as the this Friday stream, but it is on Wednesdays. And each member can send in an image that will be put into a lottery pool. And I do paint overs. It's just $5 a month. You get 4 live streams. And right now, because we're just starting, there's not that many people entering images, so you have a really good chance of getting a paint over during the live streams. And it's not necessarily even about you getting your image painted over, but just getting to hang out and kind of watch it. I also give you the opportunity to join in the chat live, and we can talk while we're doing the paint overs. But you want to join at the Super Swatcher level in order to do that, and you can be sharing the emotes. Looks like Joachim. No, that's the American way of saying it. I'm sure that's wrong. Joachim, is that right? Is that closer, Anna?
Joachim,
Joachim. Joachim.
Joachim.
Yeah, we don't have that sound in English. We'll go with that. But thank you so much for joining as a member, and look forward to you joining the Paint Over stream next week. Okay, number 3, new art challenge. All right, so this one is wrapping up Group 1's art challenge. This is the finals for Group 1, which means that we need to kick off a new art challenge. And that's going to be starting tomorrow. The tickets for the new challenge will go up tomorrow. And we're going to take a little break from the other announcements and go over what that is. So I went out there and I asked you guys kind of what you wanted. I had a couple of people suggesting another MTG subject. And the last time that we did it, MTG Magic the Gathering themed, it was really popular. So I wanted to go back to that and hit on some other topics that aren't necessarily just characters. So let's take a look at the outline. This one, for Group 1, and I will be doing 2 groups on this. Each group will have 12 tickets. So collectively, there are 24 tickets that will become available. And you will have till the 21st to submit your sketch. And then you'll have 2 more weeks to submit the final. It is on artifacts and elementals. Choose one of 2 MTG topics, either artifacts or elementals. Within each of these, you have 2 options. If you want to do an artifact, you can choose between the Horn of Sorrows or Thaden's Puzzle Box. Now, on the Horn of Sorrows, it is a horn of dark material, some sort of dark colored horn. And it has been turned into, a horn that you would blow to make a noise. It is upright on a worn wooden pedestal. It is not a corrupt object, but instead a horn used to announce somber occasions, such as a king's death. It has silver metal adornments, and it is old in appearance. I do have some inspiration reference images to look at. We'll take a look at this. Those once we read over the rest of the descriptions. Next one, Thaden's Puzzle Box. An invention of the Kaladesh inventor Thaden, who uses the box to judge the mental acuity of his prospective students. Depict the scene from the viewpoint of the person trying to solve the box, showing the two hands working at the answer. Now, the box need not be a proper cube box. It should be shiny brass with concentric layers of pieces. Kind of use your imagination. Now, in this case, you want to go look for other Kaladesh designs and the sort of way that they are created, the sort of lights and colors that you use for the Kaladesh set. I did some images for that, and I pull up some reference images on that as well. So basically, this is a POV, point of view, as if you were the person looking at your hands and you're manipulating this sort of mental puzzle thing. Okay, next up, elementals. Choose from 2 elemental creatures. There we go. Let's take a look at this one first. You can choose either the Harrowing Sentinel or the Sentinel of the Fathoms. Harrowing Sentinel is a resident of the Gothic horror plane of Innistrad. This is playing on an MTG lore, that is one of the worlds in MTG lore that is a Gothic horror theme. Everything in it, it's all, werewolves and vampires and creeping things of the night. And so this exists in that plane. It is an earth-based undead creature, approximately 20 feet or 6 meters in height. Depict the sentinel entering a village or homestead. That is, you probably see some buildings around it, a barn, a house, a tavern, something like that, in order to give an element of size relation there. You may have include humans running in fear, or maybe even rushing to fight it with torches and some farmer tools, pitchforks and shovels and all that sort of thing. The elemental is comprised mainly of large thorny vines, earth, and rotting vegetation. Other elements such as an iron fence, tombstone, or bones may be included. It's the idea that dark magic has infused a part of the ground and given it this sort of undead life. And whatever was included in that ground would become part of it. So, if it was taken from a graveyard, maybe it has part of a coffin and bones inside of it. Innistrad is always depicted at night or dusk. It is not a daylight scene. Taking a look at the last one, we have the Sentinel of the Fathoms. A resident of the Grecian mythology-themed Theros. It's a Grecian mythology-inspired set called Theros. Again, go look at all the references for Theros. This is a water and plant-based elemental, approximately, again, 20 feet in height. Depict the sentinel guarding the entrance to an underwater passage at a beach. It may be made of water, include vegetation such as seaweed or coral, and it should have bronze armor pieces and hold a weapon. It should be a beautiful sentinel. It's imposing, and this one is in daylight. So think of some sort of underwater passageway, like a tunnel that leads down to an underwater area, or maybe it is an underwater tunnel, like it's literally water in a tunnel, that magic is being held in this tunnel shape, and it's guarding the entrance to it. All right, as always, if you're concerned about a specific change, you think, oh, can I do this or can I do that with it? Can I interpret it this way? Hey, shoot me an email. Let me know. Shoot me a message on Discord or Facebook, and I will try to get you an answer. I will be providing a PSD template at the ratio of MTG images, and you can do your image to follow that. Contains spots for you to put in your reference images, your sketches, your studies. And that is all for you to improve your image. Use the references, do your studies, it will improve the image. Then, of course, send in a JPEG of them all combined. All right, now I just gave you a brief rundown earlier of this, Anna, but now that you've heard the full explanations, if you were to do one, which one do you think you'd go with?
Um, they are both very tempting. So it really depends on what the person wants to improve. So
Mm-hmm.
prop design, like the items, is I think at least what I heard so far, is very much looked for in an artist. So
Mm-hmm.
many card games and other games are looking for people who do that because most people are going for character and character design, and there are so many people competing on that. So if you are good at painting environments or items or stuff
Yeah.
like that, then you are pretty much sure to get a job decent at a decent company. So I think it's a good thing to train that. But
Mm-hmm.
also the elemental creatures. So in the fantasy world with these elementals, so good to get creative with like yeah, rather elementals and give them shape and um, design all that. And there's a lot of nice compositions you can do with that. And lighting is
Yeah.
a really hard thing to do for this one. So you really train here to not over brighten everything
Mm-hmm.
and keep things at a nice contrast. So it's a good training for you if you're having trouble with that usually. So yeah,
Yeah.
they're both having really, really strong points, I'd say.
Yeah, I wanted to cover a large range, and at least with the Sentinels, it's there we get a really dark creature in a dark environment with really ominous lighting, and the other one is this like really classic, well lit, heroic sort of scene, and so real disparity there between that. The Horn of Sorrows doesn't necessarily need to be a really dark image, but it should be very controlled and very kind of muted. On the other hand, Thaden's puzzle box is really shiny and interesting and complex. So I just trying to give a range there. And I'm also thinking that after this challenge, we'll probably stick to the MTG for the next set, and we may be going over other things like I'm thinking of like spell scenes where there's an action going on, which will include more characters. So it depends how this one goes, and we'll go with that. Okay, as far as some of the inspiration images to help example some stuff, I just grabbed these real quick. I hopped out to ArtStation and ran some searches and grabbed some images. The Horn of Sorrows on the left side, background can be kept out of focus like you see on that top image. I think that's a really nice way in order to get that artifact to show up well. And of course, this is all owner, the rights go to the owners. These are not my images. These are just ones I grabbed. Consider different horn shapes. Is it a simple curve? Does it twist? Consider what kind of animal it came off of. You might get a really cool horn that you've never seen if you go look at some different animal horns. Does it have different kind of little rib patterns on it? Is it smooth? That sort of thing. And it may include carved imagery. So is there imagery carved in the metal? Is there imagery carved on the horn itself? Is the end of it carved to be like, a ram opening its mouth, or a lion, or, it does the whole thing follow a motif of a particular animal, that sort of thing. So lots of options there. And it's all about the design and kind of some of the nuances of telling the story of what this horn is and giving it bit of a character. Thaden's puzzle box. Kaladesh uses a lot of shiny gold and brass in curved shapes. Consider accent colors and glowing elements, and fills most of the frame with the subject. In this case, it is a puzzle box. Make sure that we're not doing a frame where, if this is the whole image, that we don't have two hands coming out here and the puzzle box is like that big. No, that's one of the reasons I included this, is because even though this is like a small just necklace piece, it fills most of this frame, and it's obviously that's what that scene is about. So consider that. And these are just references for different Kaladesh designs of usually having a plate that's more simple, right? Then inside of that, you have a cutout with more complex gears. And you can do that with the puzzle box too. It's like it has a plate, and then you see little dials and things to mess with in order to try to open it up. And over here we have the Harrowing Sentinel. I really like this piece. This one came out very close to what I had in mind. Like I'd already wrote the description, and then I was looking around and came across that. I was like, oh man, if people could do that sort of feel to it. I'm not sure which card this is, but it was for an MTG card back in 2016. That would be very close, and that could serve as an excellent direction. Now, this one is really good because it is like an elemental, and I think the drippy sort of moss shapes and the vaguely skeletal rib cage sort of design there, really good. The hands are also really nice if you could take a cue off of that. And this one, just the undead feeling of it, setting it around a tombstone area. Maybe it does have some things that reflect like a fleshy element to it. So vaguely humanoid, rotting appearance, ominous lighting would be some of the takeaways there. Then for the Sentinel of the Fathoms, again, vaguely humanoid. Sunny Day, this is just a good example of a Theros set. It is classic, brighter, sunny day, like bronze armor, and let's see, very heroic. This was just a water elemental. I thought there was some good stuff going on here where you could see the light coming through some of this, and that was cool. Also, look for the water not just being like a water column coming up straight, right? What you want for something like this is to give it some twist, where the water is doing this sort of thing as it's rounding around, and it's going in a couple of different patterns. So it's going up in a spiral pattern. And that's a lot more interesting than just going straight up. So, okay. We getting any questions that we need to answer on this before we move on? Have you noticed anything, Anna?
Not so far. No, I think we
No.
can start with the challenge.
Okay. If you do have questions on this, feel free to drop it in. We will probably address it at the end of the stream when we're just wrapping it up in case people missed it at the beginning. Okay, now it is time to go on to the entries here. I'm going to start by taking a look at Aurelie. Just going alphabetically here. I'll go ahead and minimize that. I don't really need that in my way right now. Okay. All right. Says she said Hannah instead of Anna, but all right. we know who we're talking about. Wasn't a big fan of the cables idea. I mentioned the idea of cables going to the distance last time, with the buildings overlapping instead, but was really struggling with the perspective. How do you make more interesting building shapes, and how do you make them look worn or damaged? Okay, do we want to start with you? Do you have some comments on this? I didn't really do a paint over here, but we can certainly discuss those topics.
Yeah, definitely. So, already, I really like the colors and the sharpness in the middle of the painting. It's really clear what your focal point is. We know the proportions of things because of the character in the foreground. It's a very good, stable composition you have here. And I also like you had before this layering of one layer of cloud and the next layer of cloud. You kind of made it more of a swirl into the painting, and it's more overlapping in a more natural way.
Yes.
And I think this is a very big improvement. I feel like the buildings because they're slightly rounded. I think she was going for a fisheye kind of perspective grid,
Mm.
but I
Mm-hmm.
feel like she could have gone for one that is a little bit having a stronger fisheye effect.
Yes.
Because by now it is so slightly that you feel like, oh, she just mistook the perspective for example, the building on the left. It's not the right perspective. But I think if you really make all of it more fisheye, it can fit again into the frame. And the buildings are super tiny, so if you have a fisheye effect and you have really small buildings, you can't pull it off nicely to show people this is a that this
Good
is a
point.
specific kind of perspective. So I would enlargen the buildings, and also the foreground is like a super straight line, and I feel like this is not fitting the rest of the composition. I think before what you submitted before was more following this roundness of the composition that she had before with the I don't know what was it like nature and stuff. So she wanted to have it now to take out the nature. This is all good, but if you have a fish eye, and even if it's like a straight ground, it goes up. Like the sides go up. They get round. They get rounded. So not just the background, also the foreground gets rounded in that fish eye effect. And I think she could have, um, yeah, put the fisheye effect also in for the foreground. Also, the foreground there is a little bit lack of detail, so I think some get some reference for rooftops. There's some stuff on there, like I don't know, some machines and I don't know the English terms for all that, but there's so much going on rooftops with for
Oh yeah.
air conditioning, and I don't know, there's much to put on there. It's not just a flat place, and you could add the detail for the rooftops there, definitely, and especially in the foreground. Yeah, and the other thing I think, Clint, you can show well how to make them look worn and damaged. Of course, taking parts out, making cracked windows, also putting a little bit up the reflection on the glass of the buildings would be nice, because by now it's all the same value, it's all the same
Yes.
reflectivity. So basically, we have just cubes made of a very dull stone, and we want to sell the materials of the buildings better. So you must play around with reflectivity and contrast in values. Yeah, these are my first thoughts, Clint. What were your thoughts on this piece?
Oh, those are. I like those thoughts. Those are good observations. I'm with you with the perspective. Not sure if she was trying to go for the fisheye. If you're not familiar with what that is, it has to do with lenses and the curvature of a lens. The more a lens is curved, the more that's going to distort the scene. So if you've ever looked out of a keyhole, a little peephole on a hotel door, it allows you basically a 180-degree view. That's extremely fisheye, very wide, and it allows you to put a lot of scene into a very small area. In this case, I don't know that that's what we're going for. And that's up to her. It feels like there's just enough of it that maybe that's what Arlie's trying to do. If so, then you might want to push it further. And then, yeah, there is all kinds of stuff on top of buildings. There's probably air conditioners and pipes, and sometimes water towers. They'll have small water tanks. There's going to be antenna. There's going to be small reception discs for like radio and TV, that sort of thing. Yeah. Oh, now M does make a good point here, that you probably don't understand some of these English terms, Anna, because you don't watch enough sci-fi. But fortunately, that is something that can be remedied, and and we're here for you.
I'm sorry, but the term like for antenna and air conditioning is nothing to learn from a sci-fi movie. It's just like general terms that I don't know, just didn't come up with it at the moment. And pipes and that stuff like that. This is exactly what I wanted to say. No need to watch sci-fi for
Oh,
that.
no? Okay. Oh, well, our mistake for sure.
Yes. Don't be
Uh,
ashamed.
okay, I do want to mention the color though. We've got like a really green tone. I felt that was a little off.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to say maybe pushing the green more into, for example, a violet or something, because we have
Mm-hmm.
the blue orange, which is a direct complementary, and then there's suddenly green. So either make it a split complementary, or having like a color that is a little bit more of the family of either of those, like from the blue or the orange. And I think a cool
Yeah.
one would fit well, so a purple, for example.
Do a
That
quick
was really
color
good.
here. Yeah, so I'm just looking at that. The color that the clouds become up there in the top left, and it is shifting to like a cooler sort of blue, grayish blue. And I just feel like that's probably what these buildings are going to take on, because most of these aren't. It's not giving me. Okay. Most of these are not going to have any color of their own. I mean, it's probably going to be just like grayish concrete. And so it's going to take on the color of whatever the ambient light is. In this case, it's going to be the cooler part there. I'm going to put it over, and I'll have to adjust it because it's a little too violet right now, but at least I can go over it and change it. Here. Yeah, I think just the complementary, where you have the cool and the warm, but the warm is way more saturated than cool. You don't necessarily need an even balance between them as far as saturation goes. So something like that is going to be better than the greenish tone. Yeah. With that, with the buildings, bringing it back to sci-fi. With the buildings, what you really want to do is go take a look at post-apocalyptic artwork. And I downloaded a couple to example kind of what I'm talking about. So over here on the other side, we'll take a look. I just pulled up on Pinterest, I think it was, and grabbed some post-apocalyptic images, artwork. And so this is what you're going to be looking at. This sort of thing right here. And look how they're doing it. You can do it where there's plant vegetation that's overgrowing, and that's one indication that it's falling apart. Otherwise, what you want to do is be looking at the jaggy edges, particularly on the tops of the buildings. And you have to learn a little bit about how these sort of buildings are constructed, and the elements that are actually made of concrete or the steel beams inside of there are going to hold up longer, and that's what you're going to have along these edges. Now, if you're interested, there are people that have gone out there and made like destroyed building Photoshop brushes. And yeah, of course, it's not going to be 100% what you need, but you could drop in some buildings real fast and get those shapes and then modify them. And that might be a lot faster and easier way than trying to hand draw all these buildings. You probably have to like warp the perspective and stuff too. This one I thought was interesting because it's a wholly different set of shapes. It's not your normal building. It's some sort of ramshackle set of buildings. So that one's kind of cool down there. So that's what you're going to be looking for in yours, and it's really deconstructing the building so that it's what is the framework inside. It's kind of like getting the human and taking it down to the skeleton, right? And we're going to start doing that with these. And you're also going to be looking at stuff like this, and it's getting pieces and dragging them down and busting up the shapes so that there's a bunch of random noise and wires and pieces of concrete and all this stuff. And it just gets visually very noisy. Now, I got this image right here, and I enlarged that, and I just kind of tossed it over this image, your image. And you can kind of see how that plays out there. And if we were to get your same sort of smoke sort of thing, and you could start adding that in. Now, I'm not saying use his artwork, but it's faster than me having to go in there and paint it all. I'm just using it as a mock-in. All right. So what do you think about that sort of direction? Does that make sense as far as the shapes and how to kind of approach mentally doing it, or any input there?
Yeah, definitely. I just think that many artists will have the fear of being like a thief if they put someone else's art or photograph or something in it. And I think it's a good question to you, Clint, on how to go about these things. I know that you purchase a lot of photos. To work with them, but do you have tips on how to use this photos as a help, as a guide in your
Yeah.
paintings?
Well, yeah, I'm just doing this because it's way faster to example by just mocking something in than having to draw it. So that's the kind of idea. When you're looking at it, what you want to do is look at what is making this have the appearance that it has. And so, yeah, you're looking at it and saying, okay, well, how much are they destroying it? Well, it really looks good if you take it all the way back to just the beams, and you're looking for this sort of shape language of lots of the spiky bits, very uneven. You got some of the cross pieces. Some of the pieces stick together, some of them don't. You've got little thin pieces. You've got thicker pieces. And so that's what you're going for. And you're looking at some pieces are kind of bent out to the side. Maybe they have bits hanging off of them. And you can practice just doing these sorts of things for a while. Some stuff may be leaning over or broken. Maybe it's broken and then, what is it pushing up against? And you're just slowly doing the framework and then coming in and adding some connector areas to it. So you can look at it and you can learn from it without necessarily copying it. Now, you can get the same building layout that you have right now and do that same sort of thing. I might find it easier to actually draw it up that way than take away, but you could try doing it by taking away. In which case, it's just like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to break that down, and I'm going to make the top of that jaggedy and uneven. And then I'm going to come back and add some little pieces kind of across there. And then maybe some going across the other side. And then maybe a piece came off there, or there's some stuff hanging down. And so you really want to start taking it away from that. Okay, anything else? Worn, damaged? Yeah. Go look at photos of buildings that are being demolished. Buildings, unfortunately, that have been hit by bombs and that sort of thing, and look at the way that they deconstruct when they're left, or abandoned buildings. Yeah, that sort of thing. I do like how the clouds are progressing. I like those tones. I like those shapes. Oh, and I did want to mention. This is good for a block in, and then what you want to do is you want to go in and be more specific with the shapes of your clouds. And so these is kind of like basic cloud idea, just generic clouds. Now this, for instance, has a better set of shapes. You have stretched clouds, you have puffy clouds, you have thin ones, you have fat ones. So in here, you want to go in and start actually building up the volume. And it's not just all roundy shapes. Consider of it almost like it's flowing, right? And some pieces are stretched. So some pieces maybe have more motion going a certain direction. And so they're going to have more of a direction pull to them. And then other areas won't. And so they're going to have puff out because they're a little more static. And this is going to give you a variance of shape where it's not all the same sort of repetition of everything is just a rounded fluff ball, and we're looking at a different variety of shapes based on its motion, and the faster it's moving, the more it's going to stretch out and make different shapes.
Yeah, clouds are a little bit hard to paint because they have a lot of different edges. They have very sharp edges, they have middle soft, they have lost edges, and all in one object. And
Mm-hmm.
the shapes are, I don't know, we are used to this little puffy shape that we drew as a kid to yeah, show a cloud. But when you look like at real clouds and your references that you have there, then you see that there is so much different shapes within there. Big shapes, middle shapes, and small shapes, even in one cloud. So the same thing we have for composition, like we have big objects, small and tiny objects, or middle and small objects.
Mm-hmm.
You do the same thing for clouds. Try to get different sizes and different shapes in it and different edges, and I think then you can improve the shape of the clouds a lot. Just stick close to the reference you already got there.
Yeah. And it just means you're just going to be moving from one little spot to the next spot, just making the shapes more interesting and more unique.
Yeah.
Okay, the
I can
next one
also
we're
just talk about it. I can't paint clouds myself. I know how it should be done, but I can't do it myself.
the
Yeah,
next
but you can
image
do it early.
is
Go for it.
Phonologus as
Yeah,
his
sorry.
piece is thanks for the critiques. Started over to hit the points you mentioned last time, but ran out of time to get any further. This is a massive improvement over the other one. The other one was this one up here that was just we talked about it being too random. It was just a really random shape, and the image was overall just kind of uninteresting and flat. And this one has a much cooler angle, better set of shapes, and we actually have a focal point that makes some sense. It's like a white tree amongst this area. So, yeah, this is much cooler. You've made good decisions and progressed well. From here, there's a couple of things that catches my mind. As far as how to improve it, I don't think you need any massive changes here. I think it's more about getting this from where it is and taking it to completion. And how do you do that? What do you want to make sure that you implement along the way? So with that, what were some of your thoughts, Anna?
So I really like the angle and the view that we have in this
Mm-hmm.
piece with the really huge object and this 3-point perspective. You're pulling this really well off, and I think it's a huge improvement. For the tree idea, I like to have something organic in this sci-fi, yeah, industrial mechanical environment. I just make it a single one because it's so special that there's something organic. I don't know, he has 3 of these trees in there, and I think it would be a good decision to have just one, but much larger, much more important. He can be the focal point. He can be a really beautiful, big, large tree, and he could have a little bit more space to sit on. Like he's now sitting on this very thin, um, how do you say, plane? I don't know. He can have a larger plane for himself where he sits on, and there's maybe, I don't know, cables going to the tree that pull the energy from it or anything like that. You know, there can be a how to say a big round glass around it or something in order to protect it or to give it an atmosphere where it can live in or something special, you know, to make this really this the focal point and to give it more usage also. Why is that tree there? He must be like either something religious or something that gives us energy, or you decide what he's there for, but make this clear to the viewer. Is it maybe the last tree on earth or something, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So give it a purpose to be in that environment and give it some place to sit on. These were my very first thoughts on that. And maybe also give the tree color, a lot of color, beautiful color. Everything else can be tuned down and purplish gray, but the tree is maybe green and strong and beautiful and bright and stuff like that. And yeah, so I would make this a much larger topic to me. I don't know whether I misunderstood and it's not the focal point and it's just growing stuff here and there. And but this was my impression that its tree is kind of an important part of this painting. And yeah, the upper part of the painting where there is just wall by now, having some pipes running down there and stuff, and some openings and cables, so that you just make use of it, because nearly half of the painting by now is a flat surface,
Yeah.
the upper half, and we must make more use of that. Otherwise, it's lost space to us.
Hmm.
Yeah, but I really like the idea, and I think this can lead to something really cool.
Yeah, well, some of that was exactly what I was thinking. One of my notes was, let's just have the one tree that makes it more unique, makes it more special. Let's get rid of the other two, and giving it some sort of platform that makes sense, that it could, live on this platform and have enough room for the roots and stuff. As far as the rest of it, it's pretty good. I would change this cable because it's exactly along the angle of that corner. And it would be better if it just went basically any other way than directly down that corner. So that can be adjusted. And you may want to adjust that one so it looks like it's going off that way instead of straight down. So that could be different there too. This I thought was good, the value study one, and it indicated like there was a light on that tree spot right there. So I would push that direction. I did a little adjustment with the values there, and I think it gets more interesting if you crank the light down to be a little more focused on just that spot. And if this is, I took this as like an elevator shaft of some kind, and that means that the bottom of this, you could have like a light here, and so it's lighting this dude from the back, and maybe he's not black. He could actually be light from there, and then his cast shadow, could be going across. And it just get a little more nuanced with the light that way. I kind of like the idea of the white tree, but I can also see it as being a discordant color scheme where almost everything is gray, and we're doing what you were talking about, which is the tree is some beautiful cherry blossom, pink and whatever, and that could work too. You just need to make sure that that's what you're going for and make it obviously colorful that way. The other observation was that I thought maybe you're putting snow. Is this deposits of snow around a couple of the areas? In which case, that's kind of cool. It's like maybe there's an opening the roof out of the scene, and you actually do have snowfall coming down over this area. And the tree is all white and covered in snow, and you have deposits of snow on all of the pipes and the sides of the wall and stuff down in that area. And that could be pretty cool. It's a different direction with it. So, we'll consider that as well. We don't need a lot of information visually up in this top wall if you get it, very dark. But we do need some sort of pipes or paneling or ventilation shaft or that sort of thing. Basically what you have down there in your reference image, and just pieces of concrete, or at least show us the seams in the concrete, right? And where the concrete is, that sort of thing. That was my main one. I think most of it's going well. A lot of it's just unfinished. I assume that he's going to do some of the work on the walls and stuff. But yeah, I would simplify things down to just the single tree. And if you're going to if you're going to keep it at size, it really needs color. If you're going to keep it white, then it probably does need to be bigger, so it can be seen bigger, clearer on a smaller size. And maybe tossing in some lights in this other area. Occasionally in the background, maybe there's just some little lights on panels and stuff. I could also see there being lights on the um, the elevator shaft. Just little safety lights occasionally on the corners and that sort of thing would make sense that you would see some there. And they don't necessarily need to be bright. I mean, they could even be like some sort of dull blue if you wanted just a little color to them. Any additional thoughts on that? That was my main observations.
No, I think it's really cool. So there's a lot of possibilities he can
Yeah.
choose from what he. Yet it depends on the mood he wants to convey or the story he wants to tell with this piece. But it's a really nice starting off point, and I'm looking forward on what you will do with it. And hopefully we see the finished piece on Discord or Facebook.
Yeah, me
And
too.
share.
Well, we'll look forward to that then. Okay, moving on, we have Joey.
Yes.
Okay. A couple of comments here. Really like my third sketch inspired by Tyler Edlund's videos. I felt like it was a little difficult for me to push it to the final stage with my limited experience. Therefore, went with the first sketch that was closer to the device you gave. Had a first thought of making the cubes and the ruined cubes a light source, but then the big cube in the distance felt as if it was getting too close to the foreground because the values started to meld together. So this is where I am now. I can't wait for advice. Okay. This has some of the holdover in that we still have like a sandy thing going on here in the foreground, and the guy on the bike, and he's looking off into the distance. We used to have a city here. Oh, actually, I did put the sketch over there. That's the sketch. And so there's definitely been some changes made. I think generally they've been for the better, but this could also be pushed further. I did make some adjustments. We'll take a look at those in a moment. But let's get your thoughts first, Anna. How did this hit you, and how would you think about trying to handle some of those issues?
Yeah. So I like the idea Joy had here, and yeah, it's something that you don't see often, and very interesting world building that he or she, I don't know actually, sorry, um, did here. I think that a problem of this painting is that all the main shapes, like the large cubes and the moon, are around the same size,
Yep, I
and
was going to mention that.
that that flattens the painting a lot because things of the same size look like they are all in very close to each other. So of course it could be that they are super far away, but still at this size. This is not about realism or not. It is about you choosing a good composition. And I think it would be better to shrink um, some parts. For example, the bright cube, and shrink it down, and maybe the moon, and even make it super huge or super small or something, just to give the painting more depth. And I wasn't sure whether the round form he is traveling upon is like a planet or something, but it's super tiny then because because of the amount of how the horizon is shaped of
Hmm.
this object. It would mean that it's rather small and not looking like a planet, But yeah, so I'm not sure where he is. Is he traveling through different objects flying in the in the universe, or is it a planet where some shapes are flying around it? So I was a bit confused about that. And also the values, he did well with the moon and the foreground, for example. It's huge contrast and all, but still there's a lot of similar. If you squint, you see that except for the moon and the bright cube, everything is pretty much the same darkness, and there is no, how to say, maybe because we are in outer space, but there is no atmosphere or smoke or clouds or anything, so it feels a bit flat and, yeah, boring to me because it's all one value. It flattens a lot, and I don't know how to go about that. If you don't have atmosphere and clouds, what you could do, maybe change the local value of things a little bit more. Maybe it already helps to make the forms being a little bit more apart from each other by shrinking down the cube. I'll see how Clint will do this with while he overpaints a bit or changes some stuff in it. So I'm a bit confused. I'm in a stage where I would like to help it, but I don't know which direction because there are many options you can choose from. You can go
Yeah.
about compositional things. You can go about edges because it's all the same sharpness of edges. This is another thing that makes it flat. It's basically two main values, a bright and a dark one,
Yeah.
and all this adds to this flatness of it. And yeah, it loses interest by doing that. And so there are many different things we could change to make this come more to life. So I'm really looking forward what you have to say about this one, Clint.
Yeah, a lot of. I think one of the big ones that immediately strikes me is, we've got the moon and the cube basically the same size, and so somebody's got to be made bigger, somebody's got to be made smaller, and that's going to work a lot better. Your observation about the ground is really good, and it's one that may be overlooked easily by a lot of people. We have to keep in mind that eye level will always have the horizon line. Now, he's on some sort of terrestrial body, some sort of planet or moon. Now, our eye level, we're actually looking down on this guy a little bit. So I'm assuming our level is somewhere around here. That means there has to be a horizon all the way up to there. There's always a horizon line at the eye level. And so that would mean all of that becomes land. And that's not what we have right now. I mean, it could be kind of interesting. You have this thing coming up over the horizon that way. But otherwise, it looks like he's on a ball, the size of just a building. And I mean, literally, that has to be like the size of the planet. It's like the King Kai's house from, Dragon Ball Z. And I move things around. If it was me, I would make, because the cube is the focal point, I would make the cube bigger, and then I would decrease the other things, and that's how I'd handle the size. So I move him down, and we've got him out of the way more. And then I would actually make the cube bigger and shove that moon out of the way more. So that's the sort of change I would make using the same sort of elements, right? Using the same elements, we're just shifting the sizes around a bit. And I think ultimately that's going to fit a lot better. Now, in this case, I didn't make the change, but we could even put the horizon line. If you want to play with the horizon down to about there, you might be able to get away with that as well. Somewhere in that region. Have some like far dunes or something. And yeah, that works pretty well. I want to throw your attention to a couple of reference images I grabbed over here. And these are some cool sci-fi images there on the top left that example some of the same things. Like we've got this big spaceship up there, reminds me of the Heart of Gold, and you've got the ground there in the foreground, little characters here. And you notice that like they double down on the size of that background thing to make it look big. Now this one doesn't use the same dynamic as far as kind of the asymmetry of the layout. It uses a very symmetrical layout where everything is in a straight line coming down the scene. But there is some correlations between what you have as far as the ways that you might want to light it. And it has a really cool lighting situation there where the foreground is very much in shadow, similar to what you've got. And then maybe the cube itself is actually shadowed and it has a bright light along some of the edges. And this one I just thought has a similar thing. Like this was cool that it used, you know, the grooves in the ground in order to direct your attention. And that makes me think that perhaps you could use the curves in the sand to actually get your attention to go into the scene, because right now the curves are actually going the other way. It helps keep you out of the scene. And so I would probably be adjusting that so it leads you in that way. Using, yeah, it's the same design principle as this, which is using converging lines to draw you to distance. And I thought that was just cool, the way that they did like some of the sky with like nebula and some bright stars back there. And that was neat. As far as the cube design, the cube itself is fine. I think it's this cool, simple sci-fi thing. But how can we get it and make it kind of interesting, right? And I grabbed some other cube images from Pinterest. Here's kind of a cube shape. It has different panels. One end of it is opening up and there's light coming out of it. So if the whole thing isn't going to be a light source, that could be a really interesting option. This one is a whole thing is a light source, but it's obviously dirty. It's old. It's got imperfect edges on it where the light is, it's like it's filtering through a block of ice, but it looks really cool. And that could give more visual interest than the whole thing just being this ball of white light. Up here, this one is cube-ish, but I really liked some of the designs going on it. That it has the simple triangle designs in the big pieces, and then it has a smaller design inside of that, and then it has the really refined small designs inside of those. And I can see that working on here as well. And the last one is a basic cube that just has all kinds of little designs on it. But you can also tell that it's old because there's kind of like the top layer and then the bottom layer. And that's what you could think about on this one, is if it's worn away, what do you see underneath? Is there actually tech and wires and circuit panels? And what about the construction? Is there an underframing to this object, or is it like a solid piece of stone? That would be my input. How do you take that, Anna? Any comments?
It's a really nice idea with the inside of that cube. Probably get references of computers and stuff. How would you go about reference search for that? How to Google that or look on Pinterest?
Yeah, you could do that. There's also a lot of resources online. You could look up like sci-fi tech pattern. And there's a lot of 3D model artists who have created basically texture maps to use on 3D objects in their models. And it just has kind of interesting but somewhat generic sci-fi patterns. And I would look at that and use that. And you might combine that with, go look at something like a Mayan pattern, and you use that for your big shapes. But then you use like sci-fi tech patterns as some of your little small shapes. And that way there was a correlation between like these ancient designs like modern technology.
Yeah, cool stuff. Sounds challenging, but that's what we are here for.
Yep.
Challenge
And
ourselves.
and personally, if it was me, I would do what you said, Anna, which is I'd be adding atmosphere in order to build a greater sense of depth and allow you to fade out some of the edges and fade in some midtones.
Yeah, or sand that's being pulled up by the guy that just flew over it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like a sand cloud or something. Just give it some particles and little tiny stones or something. It's too clear by now, and yeah. I think we can take the artistic freedom to put something like dust and atmospheric stuff, even though there might be, or there is a lot of dust in the outer space. I'm not good with outer space, so I would have to get some references. But
Well, if
yeah,
you
don't
just
make
watch
it
enough
too
sci-fi
clean.
shows, you'd know.
Yes,
But
yes, I
yeah.
could. Maybe. Which one would you recommend to start with? What's the best sci-fi movie you can recommend?
Well, you should probably start with Doctor Who. Yeah.
You cut out for me. What should I start with?
Watch Doctor Who.
Doctor Who. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a lot
The
about
newer
Doctor
ones,
Who.
not don't start with like the 1960 ones. They're
Okay.
super cheesy. I mean, they were good for the time, but yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, I've got to be moving along a little faster. I didn't mention it at the beginning of the stream, but I have something coming up this evening. So I'm going to try to wrap it up within about the next hour. So moving through a little faster than we normally would. Daniel's image is up next. Says, I couldn't paint the underlight properly, so I sculpted and textured a 3D face, and lit it from underneath. The painting is still not finished as I wanted, but I had some free time. But I had some time issues due to longer hours at work. Okay. Yeah, I get the feeling you're probably having a challenging time with it, and I think one of the things that you're running into is I don't see a single reference that actually has the lighting you're trying to get. Like I see a reference for the face and for the hair and for a silhouette and for the features, but I'll see like any image from any movie of like this is the sort of realistic lighting I'm trying to, you know, copy. And inherently you're going to have some real problems with that. Because you're trying to do it realistically, but you're not having a fixed point to go off of. So this is sort of a tricky one. But do you have any comments, observations, or suggestions here, Anna?
Yeah. So I think what I really like about the work of Daniel is that he always listens closely to what you tell him in the critique. So you always see that he's working on this stuff and really tries to work on the critique directly.
Mm-hmm.
Because the last time he submitted, we were saying it's like very flat lighting and you could have done this or that, and we gathered some ideas on how to go about the lighting in this piece. And he changed it. It's so huge changes. He was like at the same level of rendering, but it was a completely different piece. So he
Yes.
put on himself a lot of work in order to get something new and learn something out of the challenge. And I really like this effort that Daniel does with each and every challenge he joins. And I really want to state that out because this is not something everybody does. To be honest, there are many people who are taking this much more. How to say? We Germans say take it on an easy on their shoulders. You say that not taking it much seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I want. And he really always takes it super seriously and tries his best. And I really, really like that about Daniel's work here in the challenges. Um, so for this piece, I think it is not the best approach to have shadows that are that dark and having no ambience at all because he has now two light sources, like in his reference from the 3D model. But his 3D program seems to have ambient lights being turned off.
Yeah.
And that's the problem when you have a 3D model and you don't know the program well, or you don't know how to set things up. They don't, if you don't put it directly in, they don't have ambient light. And ambient light would fill in the shadows and bring back form. And that is why I really recommend for this piece to add ambient light and get rid of these really, really black and dark shadows. You must always think about black is lost is a loss of information.
Mm-hmm.
Pure white is a loss of information, and pure black is a loss of
Yeah,
information. Always,
they always flatten out. Yeah, because
they're
you can't
always
go
black.
lighter or darker than white and black.
Yeah, and you have both in here, so I would go away from both sides. So have more mid um, mid values,
Mm-hmm.
more middle values. Yeah. For the face, I think he has done really well with working with the reference. I'd recommend to paint over or draw over it a grid of the what I'm doing at the moment at a Sarah hat. It helps me usually when I get lost on where to put a light. I with red lines, I put the Asaro hat lines over my face and see what plane is facing which direction. And then I decide where is their light coming. It would be helpful for you in order to fill out the black on her face. Then you know, okay, this plane is facing upwards, this facing down, this would receive probably bounce light from the green hair, for example, all that face up, and the others would maybe get more of the purplish light that is bounced off of the cloth or something like that. So for me, it helps to have the planes painted out, and in order to know what ambient light they are receiving. Yep. So these are my main observations for that.
Yeah, this one's tricky because generally we are pushing for more midtones because black does flatten out and there's no information there to read any kind of forms. But yet, I was talking about this being directed by how it would look if you shot it like in a live action. And a lot of live action, they do use black shadows in this really silhouette kind of stark fashion. So it can be done that way. And so I'm going to answer it of, sticking as close as possible to this with this core deep shadow. How do you make it better? And one of the first things I would do is we do need to get some midtones. And I would do that in the sky because we can have her dark, but we don't necessarily need her the same darkness as the sky. Even in this reference image up here, we have the dark silhouettes, but the sky is lighter and it allows those two to separate. And when we have the same value in the background as we do in the foreground character, it just doesn't make enough plane difference of depth. So I have a soft light layer here that I've tossed over the background, and I would accept that there was a lighting condition in which the foreground character could be in dark shadow with this sort of backlight, underlight on her, and the sky be a bit lighter. So that would be one. And then looking at this lighting, generally what you want to do is if you do have a lighting on each side like this, you want two different things going on. One would be on this side, I think probably this side, you have a bright, basically neutral light, kind of a white light, and that everything that it hits is going to be just starkly white. It's going to be basically overblown, and that's fine, but it's very limited. Now on this side, we have another light source, but it's a little less powerful, but it hits more area. And so what you have is this one is more of a mid-tone light. This one is a very bright light, but this one covers more area, and this one's much thinner. And so they actually balance out quite well. And when you put those two different kinds of lights against each other, and I moved my history. That's okay. I'll just take it off. So we put that there. And then I did a bit of repainting here. In this instance, this part of the hair here, because it is getting more of the light from whatever light source is down here, we're not going to have that part of the hair drop to black as much. So we want to brighten that up, and then just brighten up a little bit. We're not saying that this necessarily needs to become a mid-tone, but can we bring it up a little bit just to separate like the black fabric from the skin sort of thing. Then a little glow around the eyes because they're just really harsh right now. Add a little glow around there would be helpful. Now the hair itself is has good curves. It has a good overall shape. But then what we want to do is come in here and make it a bit more realistic as to how hair would behave. And it's going to be a bit more wavy, right? It's going to have some smaller pieces in it. We've got to look to see how this is sort of behaving. It's going to be curling into little ribbons, right? And we've got to come in here and do that sort of thing with it. And keeping with the main body of what you've got, but you're going to start adding in this. And I usually do kind of a push and pull and doing a little wiggly kind of S shapes in order to build that up a little bit. And just looking at her design, like her hair comes really low against her face, so we don't have a lot of forehead visible or anything. So I would be adjusting this and making the hair come down further just so it better mimics the original character design, where it's just a little bit of that face sticking out there, and the rest of it is more hair going on. But that's if you want to, follow closer. That would be my initial feedback. How would you take that? Do you think that that makes sense, or should I expound on something there?
Yeah, I must load first in the stream. I just always have to stop it, otherwise my Discord won't record the voices of yours as well. Yeah, I like that because it's still dark, but we have more form and we see more of her face. But he still doesn't lose the effect that he was probably going for with a really dark and shady appearance of her. So I think that's exactly what he needs to know in order to get on with it.
And I would pull this handout down here. I forgot to mention that. Just a little value difference between that hand. And so we have a slight indication that that's there. I think ultimately that's going to get you quite a bit closer and make it feel a bit more real. Just expanding that value into the midtones a little bit and doing some of the nuances in the hair so it doesn't have that completely anime shape. Like I said, the shape and the way it's behaving is really good, but we do need to get into turning it into hair, kind of like hair ribbons. With the green glow, that is really dependent on kind of how far you want to go with it. I would consider maybe doing a little bit more with the green glow, making that a little bit brighter along some of the edges, and it could filter into giving a slight amount of light to some of the objects in there. This is sort of tough. This is a tough lighting. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. It is tricky, and I would probably have to mess around with it for quite a while before I found a balance that I was really liked. I would suggest go try to find some artwork of people who have rendered a similar lighting well, because it's not going to be exactly the same as you would get from a photo. And so see how they've handled like a really low lighting and with like a backlight, that sort of thing. And that would be one of the things that I would do. And I wouldn't necessarily try to copy it, but I would try to see how they handled the values to make that work well. I want to think Brad Rigney might be a resource to go look at if you've not looked at his stuff. Okay. Next up is Christina. Christina has got a really basic scene of her library from the initial concepts and turned it into a much more interesting scene here with the statue in the middle of some big amphitheater, temple or something. I'm not sure exactly what this building is, but it's really a lot more interesting, a lot more interesting shapes. The colors are cool. I think those work well. You said you realized you could do more with the composition. I think you did. Obviously, still work in progress. I haven't gotten to rendering any details or the water, but interested to hear your comments. Initial reaction is quite positive to this one. How did this hit you, Anna?
So I also like especially the colors and how everything is so filigrane, so um, very elvish and a
Hmm.
lot of tiny details and really nice statue also with a good gesture and the general composition that everything is a little bit at an angle that makes it also more interesting. So I think she made a lot out of her first sketch and improved it pretty much. Um, for the place, I'm not sure because she was doing a library first, whether this is going to be also still a library or something different. So I would put for the details that are still to come, as she said herself, I would really make things clear on what this place is. Is this
Mm-hmm.
like a place of worshipping the statue, the goddess that is maybe shown in there, or is it still a library, or yeah, what kind of place is that? Is it yeah, because the references are a little bit more into like the, a cave in a jungle or something like that. So, what is completely different from a library. So, decide on what you are going for and what this place actually is. I was a little bit confused because it looks like part of it is um, I cannot say man-made because I don't know whether it's from humans or from other creatures, but it looks like it's made by some living creature, and the
Mm-hmm.
rest, the lower part, is looking like a cave. But
Yeah.
they are combined in a way where I say, okay, I'm a bit confused on how they build it because did they carve away the mountain? Or so it's a cool effect. I'm just not sure whether it fits well together. So um, yeah, it's fantasy, so you can do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
I just push it maybe really further and have it then a theme that you can find everywhere. Like there's a little bit of uh, nature environment, and then there's again something man-made or something like that. So um, and making the purpose clear. For the bridge that is in the middle of the painting, I don't know, it is basically exactly at half of the painting, and I'm a bit confused about its purpose because it stops our the way we are viewing this painting. So we are looking first at the statue, and then we look upwards, and there's the bridge, and we are cut off. So because it leads us to the left and right. So maybe having it more curving upwards or something, or taking it out, or having just um, like an open bridge when they open the bridges for for ships or something, that both sides are pointing upwards but they are not connected, something like that maybe. And having there some plateaus or something else. It's just might just a personal thing. Maybe you don't even consider changing that, but I feel like our way we are looking on this painting is disturbed by this bridge in the middle a little bit. The flow is getting disturbed a little bit because everything else is really round and enclosured, and this one is a little bit like a stop directly in the middle of the painting. Yeah, so these were my first initial thoughts. So I already talked a lot, so Clint, I'll hand it over to you now.
Yeah, it's a good observation about the kind of this disparity between the design of the like obviously constructed um, upper half of the building and then a rarely deteriorated or cave organic sort of thing on the bottom. I think you're just going to go with the overgrown thing because it looks like everything over here is like overgrown and kind of falling apart. So make sure that we are carrying that upwards. Where if you're going to have like vegetation, then we need to see some sort of like plants and stuff growing up along the top of this. We need to see some stuff hanging down, mossy bits hanging down from this stuff. We need to see stuff along this railing coming down. And then everywhere we just have little bits of moss and stuff sort of breaking up the perfect shapes. And that would tie them together a lot better. I do like the idea that this is basically a lagoon that's filled up with water down here. I think that's kind of cool. Vegetation could really be good putting in. And it doesn't, you have to go overboard with it, but having a couple of like small trees and some ferns, some little shrubbery and stuff that's growing along the edges, that could be really nice and make the place actually feel kind of more welcoming. And having some sort of like little fern thing here in the foreground would be good. This sort of plant, that sort of thing. Have some little fans and shapes going on back here. I would probably move her over. She's really close to that rock. I'd probably move her over right about there, just so that she's a little more visible and she's not going to be right next to that rock. Otherwise, she's not as easily noticed. With the bridge, yeah, something needs to happen to the bridge because it's basically cutting your view off from the top of the scene, and it's really dividing the scene between top and bottom. One of the options I would consider is if this this curvature was actually like it was continuing, and I may change that so it's a little wider. And it's as if it is continuing up over our heads in this way. And you had the bridge connecting it from this side. But maybe the bridge is broken. And so you just have kind of that part of the bridge that is going across. And you just have this sort of piece. And that would be my suggestion of how to balance the multiple things together so that you kind of have the best of both, right? And that gives you that nice curvature that still keeps your eye going around in the scene. We'd want to adjust this so that it looks like it would be continuing that curve kind of more this way, and that would be continuing back over there on each side. And that's a nice shape there. I feel pretty good about that. And yeah, I think the greenery and stuff, that would get a little tricky if you start introducing green. It can be done, but you probably want to keep it a little muted. And again, like on this, this is something that you'd want to see some little hangy bits and vegetation, drips and stuff coming off of there. I did a little, let's see, this was an overlay. I was playing with the colors and seeing about pushing the colors up a little bit. Particularly adding some more light and atmosphere here behind the statue so it pops the statue out. Right now we just got a lot of midtones. And the other thing is, this shadow is just getting really, really grayed out. I was curious about if we could pop in more color instead. And so you're playing into that color scheme. And if you want it warmer, I could see it being done warmer. And adding that sort of warm light across it, right? And that could be cool. But either way, trying to get some of the atmosphere behind there so that statue stands out some. All right, any thoughts before we wrap this one?
Yeah, so I totally second what people in chat are saying. With the statue, would be nice to be in the center of this chapel or where this person is standing in. So pushing it, maybe not shrink the size, but yeah, change the height on where she's standing. That
Yeah,
socket, or I don't know.
She doesn't seem like she's actually in the middle of this round area. It feels like she's to this end, and
yeah,
and
so
see about
bring her to the center, but maybe not shrink the size. So I think the size of her is good, but bring her more further in the back. And also don't forget, when you paint the overlapping foreground elements of this cave, that this is also a 3D space. So many people tend to flatten out stuff like that and just make it one value. You can have very faintly have also there maybe having grass or moss or stuff hanging down, and make this part of your painting and not just a flat frame for it. Don't forget that this is also 3D space, what you have, and left and right upper corner. So give it also some love, as you did for the middle ground.
Yeah, the flat blocks of tone are fine for your just value block in, but yeah, you do absolutely want to do what you're talking about, Anna, which is developing the form and figuring out exactly what these things are, and working that out. So that would be my sort of suggestions there. And listen to what Anna's saying as well, Christina. She's got a good viewpoint on this, and I think you've got a really lovely piece. So look forward to seeing what you do with it. Rhiannon. Probably Rhiannon. Yeah. Okay, says I put my original piece on the far right. So down here on the bottom right corner is what the original submission was. As far as the image differs from my studies, initially interpreted the brief as focusing on the feeling of loneliness, but based on your feedback, I've reworked the composition to introduce more architectural elements to the armillary while keeping my story intact. So we've got the main device here, the little guy climbing up on his rope there. And this is an improvement. The first one was sort of split between kind of right down the middle of, this is basically a beach scene with a sea cave, sea arch, and on this side we have the ocean with the device. And there wasn't really overlap, and it was kind of unclear what it was about. Viewpoint wasn't very interesting. So this is definitely a step in the right direction. I like the decision with that. I think the inclusion of the other shapes around here do improve the overall scene. It keeps things from being completely static of like there's just this one object. So here I'm feeling more like it's becoming, okay, how do we render it? How do we improve the values? How do we improve the colors? How can we up the design or whatever a little bit? So, okay, how did this hit you? What would be some of your suggestions? Or as a viewer, how would you feel, what needs to be done to improve this for your viewing pleasure?
Yeah, I also think it's a huge improvement of camera angle
Mm-hmm.
and how the use of space of the canvas in general is. There is no lost space anymore. It all has a purpose. I like the Dutch angle on this piece. It makes things very dynamic. And also the design of the object itself improved a lot. It's much more interesting. It's having
Mm-hmm.
different materials and different layers, and I think this is really, really good. Um, I think this person used probably a 3D program for the base of this object because a lot of it looks very,
Oh yeah, it's gotta
very
be.
rendered, like a 3D program. It means that everything, every edge, when you say it looks like it's made from a 3D program, it's basically two things. All the edges are the same. It's all the same sharpness. Also, for each plane or thing, the values are pretty much the same. So, for example, for the middle stand, I don't know, where the guy is trying to climb up to. So, that makes things a little bit less realistic and less interesting to look at because you usually have to decide where we look at, and you do this with lighting, with color, with edges, with stuff like that. But if you have everything rendered in the same way as a 3D program,
Mm-hmm.
it gets less interesting to look at.
Yeah.
And I feel like this happening here. And yes, use a 3D program for such complicated objects with perspective and all, but then also go away from it and do your own stuff. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate in every detail,
Mm-hmm.
but make it more of a painting rather than of a 3D rendering with a paint over.
Yeah.
Um, well, we had one in the challenge before that said, I want to go in the 3D direction someday. Okay, it's already up to you. It's a nice thing to do. But these challenges here on Swatches are at the moment at least for 2D artists. And we want to help 2D artists to improve um yeah and get on with their careers in 2D art. So this is why we will tell you, please don't just overpaint a 3D model and post it. Try it your own on your own.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really like, and I'm really amazed by these beautiful waves in the foreground. I must say. Person, or
Oh, you're breaking up.
oh, sorry, but I don't have the stream running. So it's really good with the rendering of the waves in the foreground, as the said. And so you see this person can paint. He can do that if he takes the time for it. So do it on your own and get away a little bit more from 3D program stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I mean, you're exactly right. 3D is exactly the tool you want to use for some things, and for a complex object like this, it's a perfectly reasonable option to use. But like what I'm doing here now, what you want to do is then move beyond that. It is now part of an illustration. You don't need to go back to the 3D program. You don't need to play with it. Now you're painting it. And what we have to do is work on the lighting, we can work on the colors, and we've got to meld them together. It all has to become a painting in the end. And uh, and so right now there's a big disparity between stuff that's painted has a particular kind of look and detail and rendering to it. Then there's the stuff that has been rendered and it's super clean and there's no brush strokes and there's no real imperfections and all the edges are super crisp and all that. And that's fine if it's all one or all the other. But when you add the two of them together, that's when things get sort of problematic. And so you've got to go in and we have to now turn it into a painting. In order to do that, we've got to think about how you're going to handle the colors and handle the values. Because right now it doesn't have a value scheme, really. Value-wise, there's just light and dark things everywhere. There's high contrast on everything everywhere. And so what I was doing there was just trying to establish some sort of light shadow pattern where it's very simple and it's readable from a smaller size, that light shadow. And the background, for instance, probably lowering down so that it's mainly towards the midtones. You don't have as much high contrast in the background, because the more contrasty it is, the less the foreground elements are going to be able to stand out. It'll make it more busy. I did find some images over on Pinterest while I was looking around for some other stuff that I thought were pretty close as far as giving ideas about how you might handle the lighting and the color, and those are there right there. And I could see both of those being good directions as far as the values and the colors. Very simple gradient here. A lot of the same colors, but you notice that the top of it's like shifting to a green, and that's kind of cool. What you can do is create, I'll grab my palette layers here. I'm going to go down. Well, we're going to try this, all right? And this can serve as a direction. It's not going to be the perfect answer. You'll have to paint it beyond this, but you can do a gradient map, and then you grab your properties. So it's going to match all the values to a gradient. And on the gradient, I'm going to choose, this is what, the darker color? The darker color is going to be kind of in violet range. Right? Okay, what I've got in terms of gradient. It'll be easier if I just put a mask on it. Okay, yeah, turn it on before I can do the mask. Okay, fine. Now I can grab it. I'm gonna just grab these colors. Shadow, we're grabbing this kind of dark greenish blue color. For the light, it is going to be sort of yellow tone. And I'm just grabbing off of this just to get us started so we can kind of see how it's working. The mid-tone is somewhere around there, violet sort of tones. And this helps bring some of the colors together. And we could just say, I'll do normal and then lower it some so that it's like half that direction, right? Change the in though. Green needs to be stronger. Yeah, and then we're saying, okay, this is one of the things that I do like, which is part of it is distinctly lit and part of it is definitely in shadow. So I'm going to do a darken layer and set it at about 60%. I'm going to grab the shadow tone, and then everything that's in shadow is just going to get a little more vibrant. I'm going to just say that it's a simple left side, kind of right side. And 2/3 will be in shadow and 1/3 will be in light. And then just to keep it simple, like those guys will be shadow. This is in shadow, and shadow, shadow. I'm not going to spend a long time doing this. I'll do a hard light, lower opacity. We're going to grab kind of a light orange tone. Throw that on there. We have that direction, right? Just a little bit. Yeah. A little more warm with it. There we go, like that color. And then even it might be that these over here are actually catching some light because it's going across to the other side, right? And so maybe that's catching light. That could be catching light. And then we could have light coming through some of these waves. That's nice. And then we're doing the sky. I'm just running off of this image instead of trying to adapt it to your violet tone. Sky can be like this. And you see how we're getting an inspiration and we're moving to follow some of those ideas as far as the lighting and how to simplify things. I like that down here. Back mountain is basically going to become a silhouette. We need very simple shapes on it. And this water is going to start taking on the color of the sky as well. It's not really going to be blue. There's not a lot of blue tones going on. That would be the direction I'm thinking with that. And you see how it just unifies things together. It feels like it has a coherent color scheme, coherent colors, value scheme. It feels like it has volume. And then the other thing you want to do here is we want to break this up so it doesn't feel real new. Like a lot of this is just absolutely pristine, clean, and I want some of that to really pop out. And so we want to come in here and we want to bust up some of the edges and we want to make it dinged. Maybe you add little, lichen and stuff growing on it. And we just make it imperfect. We just put little nicks and dirt spots. And you can just go around for a while just making random little squiggle patterns at, maybe 30%, 40% opacity. Just enough to break up the shape and make it feel like there was some sort of imperfection or dirt or whatever. Okay, so I went on for a while talking about that. Want to mention anything here, Anna?
So this is exactly what I meant with this difference between something that is looking PC rendered and the more painted to the style. So, and this is also, Clint has now shown very nicely that how you can use the 3D model, but then you must do the work and paint over it and make it your own, So make decisions and maybe get some details can be get lost. You don't have to put all the details a 3D program gives you.
Yeah.
You must decide which details are important to keep, which ones can be painted over and getting lost. What to unify, what to making stand out. So you are a composer. You are making the story, and don't be a slave to your 3D program. Just don't put something up like a landscape or a character in 3D and say, okay, I must paint it like that because the program told me that this is the realistic way to light it. You are free. You don't have to follow everything exactly. Use it as a direction and as a guide, but don't be a slave to your 3D program.
That's right. Even in like Pixar, if you go watch the Pixar videos, they might do the normal model and they're doing this expression with the model, but they want to push it further. And they're like, well, normally the model can't smile that big or the eyes can't go open that big. And so they manually go in there and they tweak the model for it to allow it to express itself in a certain, scene that goes beyond what the standard model allowed. And so artists are constantly doing this. They're getting the foundation and they're pushing beyond it a little bit for the sake of the narrative. and that's what you're doing here. So yeah, I would keep the stuff, the drawing, that is the layout, the size, the scale, all that sort of thing. That all is looking good to me. So now it's just about working on that value scheme, that color scheme, and rendering so that it all has that cohesive eventual input. All right, and we're coming up on the last one, which is Roberto. And he's going back to the Sea King. Kept the same subject here. Says, this is my first time doing an illustration like this one where I'm not just doing a copy of what I see. And I don't know if it's more fun, but it's pretty, that is surely more rewarding. Yeah, it's completely different when you're just copying one thing versus when you're trying to basically reinvent it. Something else. I hope the image is not too dark, although it is still pretty dark. On the monitor where I draw, it looks good. On the other hand, but on the other, he is Batman. I tried adjusting the levels, but it looks washed out. Is there any trick here? So is there a trick here, Anna? Because it feels washed out.
The trick is called hard edges. And something looks washed out. It's edges, and it is the how to say it in English, the parting of shadow and light values. So there's a really nice video of Marco Bucci on YouTube where he explains on how to keep the light value family and the shadow value family apart from each other. And I think this can help also a lot with this washed out effect, because washed out usually means it's blurry and the values are like a little bit messing with each other. Decide directly where is my shadow, where is my light, put the correct value for that, and especially in the face and here and there on his body, I would use a hard edged brush and bring back some of his of the line, not the lines, of the edges, the very
Mm-hmm.
sharp edges on his teeth, for example, on the eyes, the nostrils. It doesn't have to be everywhere. Not all the edges have to be sharp, but some need to be. Where there is really how to say, an edge between two objects, like for example the fins. There's this, I don't know what's it called, but there's two parts of the fins. It's like the fingers and that stuff in between. So there are parts where they are pretty much like overlapping each other. But for example, the closer you come to the head, when you look at the fish, you see it's more pronounced, like this thing, yeah, these bones or whatever that is. I don't know what,
I think they're called
to
spines.
the spines. So a little bit more defined there. So you can play around. It doesn't have to be a hard edge all over the spine, but it's maybe a little bit more where it's close to the head, for example. Yeah, but especially like teeth. Teeth must be sharp because he's the evil guy with sharp teeth. So there must be hard edges. The eyes are focal point usually. You can have their hard edges, and the nostrils also are usually one of the most common parts of the nose to have a hard edge. The rest can be a bit blurrier. Overlapping objects like the bridge of the nose, if you look at the reference of his guy, the pose face ref, you see it's a super hard edge of his nose bridge because it's an overlapping object. They're not the bridge of the nose is not connected to his cheek. They're overlapping, so there's a hard edge. So these are things to bring back. Also, the value of or the color of the crown. You have a lot of purple light
Yeah, I was
in
wondering if you
there,
were going to mention that.
and the crown is just yellow, which doesn't. Metal picks up the color that surrounds it, so you would have more of that color also into there. Also, I'm not sure whether the pink is a good choice for. I mean, it depends. It is a subjective thing, but he looks more sassy. when you give him like a pink, purple fur around his neck. So,
Yeah, I think
mm,
it was supposed to be a red light, and it's just like really tinting everything that sort of color.
yeah. I'm not sure about the color, but color choices are often very subjective. So do whatever you like. For the textures, I see that he went for the fur and for the skin of this fishy guy with really tiny brushes and did a lot of texture stuff, but all over the place. And a good tip might be if you look at references of how other people paint that, they usually choose just for example, just the highlights to add a little bit of the texture, but the rest is not having that texture. But
Mm-hmm.
your brain fills in that texture for the rest of the part because it sees there's a texture at the. Yeah, some people use it for highlights, and some people put it in like the edge between midtone and highlight to bring out a little bit of texture of things. And yeah, you would not put it, for example, in the shadow area. It's just over detailing, I'd say, and it has a cool painterly look to it if you keep it just for the bright parts of the painting and give us some hints of texture there.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a little more advanced. That is, you're using the highlight to basically put most of your texture with it, and that way you'll find that you don't actually need as much texture on everything else because it right there in the highlight tells you most of the information. I've been trying to just clean up some of the edges, and one of the small thing, like with the teeth, you're basically showing what looks like all the teeth just coming downwards, and uh, what you want to look at even on that is that half the teeth are going to be going up, so we got to get the bottom ones fitting up in between the top one. Yeah, going on. Tinted that helmet crown down a little bit, and just so it matches into the color. Overall, it looks like it is getting a bit washed out again because it's all basically in the same sort of mid dark value. So opening up the levels, we can see here that practically all of the image exists within that mid dark range right there. And I'd be curious about getting the light things and pushing them up further and pushing the dark things further. And then you can change where your midpoint is. But I think you're going to get a more interesting image. You have a bit more contrast to some of that. And then you could use a linear dodge layer because we want to keep some atmospheric or some value difference between the foreground and the background. And so in this case, I would be putting in this so that the background is sitting more in your midtones, and his shadow, him being in shadow, feels a lot darker because you've got a lighter value for it to stand out against. Getting more of this sort of thing. And then you could have some of that coming up here and brightening up his fancy furs. In fact, it can be brighter along some of that. That would be a good point to go. With the fur, it feels just really, really, really fuzzy, not furry. I would look to be utilizing the shape a little bit more so that you've got larger clumps. This is super soft, and it doesn't register real well and is small. So this is one of those cases where you probably want to use some artistic license to almost um, overly do the texture so that it is obviously fur. And so you're looking for bigger, easier to notice designs and the patterns all around these edges, these backlit edges. You're going to get this sort of fur pattern, and the clumps and the little clumps, big clumps. It's not actually that much different than from the anime rendering. You don't necessarily, again, and this same sort of thing of relative detail, you don't need to do it in all of the inside. If you just do it around the perimeter, your brain will fill in most of the information that, oh, that's what all of this is. So you can go in and pull out some clumps and sort of do those, but most of it won't need that much. What do you feel about that direction as far as adjusting some of the values, working on some of the edges, and pushing the background a little further back?
Yeah, I think this would help it definitely. Um, I'm thinking whether the face is pretty grayish compared to the body, but I think it's because the character is like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see in the
Um,
reference.
you know, I feel like there is a bit of a disparity between the dark kind of greenish tone and the white face. Do you think maybe just adding a little green tint to kind of tie them together,
Yeah,
just for
that's what I
artistic
thought.
purposes? Yeah.
Because it looks like, I don't know, they don't belong together for me right now. I see why you did that, so it's not no critique in this way, but
Yeah.
I just think it might be better to show that the face is part, or having maybe just a jaw or something being at least more
Yeah, if it kind of
clean, or
faded up. Yeah.
yeah, or some pattern on his face. Like some fish have some patterns, like line stripes or something like that, or so some fish patterns. Maybe this would be, yeah.
I'm same thing with the little fins on the side, like the spines and the little membrane area between them are basically the same. So I would be going in there and adding some different color in that as well, and trying to separate those to keep it from being too much of the same. Got a lot. You have a pretty yellow green going on. I would keep it pretty close, somewhere in that region. Yeah. And that's nice. You're probably going to have a good spike of that color up on the metal crown from the light in the background. I'm not sold on the lighting here. I think we're probably going to get lighting like under that, and then we're probably going to get some lighting here. Maybe a slightly different pattern, like we're going to catch some light up underneath that crown where it's coming around there. And we maybe even be catching a little bit in order to help bring out the back side of where that crown is back there. A couple little glints of light on that. The skin down here, I'm not sure what you're going for. If you're going for scales or if you're going for skin. I may go with just more of a sinewy thing. Because he has those lines. You don't necessarily need to do lines unless you're doing like a patterning and you translate it into, oh, he's got like this kind of almost line-based fish pattern that sort of runs up his arm. And so that would be one of those things where you'd have to make a concession between a simple drawing and how it would actually play out better in a real life situation. That, okay, we're not literally going to put lines all the way down this guy's arm, but he could have a striated pattern of like black or white or whatever going down his arm, and that would make more sense.
Yeah. Also for likeness of his face, like the character seems to have a very thin and long face, and his character has more of a squarish face. So
Mm-hmm.
it is of course up to him to change that. Just in case you went for more likeness, then I would elongate the face or push it a little bit more together. I don't know, make it slimmer and give it a little bit more of a bony chin. Also, the lips are pretty much gone in, so they're not much. Very thin lips is what he has here, and the nose is in the anime character. It looks to me basically like a human nose, but yours does fit as well because it's so monstrous, like more unhuman. But if you went for likeness, I'd say you could consider these changes as well. Also, the spines of the fins to the sides of his face. If you look at the reference, usually the skin in between the spines does not end exactly at the
Mm-hmm.
tip of the spine, but a little bit before that. And this adds a little bit more to this spiky and dangerous look. And
Yeah.
I would change it back to how it is in the reference.
Yeah, if you allow
Also,
that to curve there in that skin section, it feels like there's more tension on it,
yeah,
and that's having a pull to stretch across there.
yeah. Also feel like you don't have to make the fur overlapping his fins, so I think it's a nice design that you can show.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to cover it with the fur. I don't think even it would have to be so much to the front, but it depends. It can be really, really thick fur, but yeah, your artistic freedom is again here to choose whether it's overlapping or not. Design wise, I think it would look good to have the whole fin being visible.
Thinking that the light on the top side of this fur isn't going to be tinted much by red light. It's probably going to cool off a lot more and get the red light on that bottom side. Yeah, this one just takes a lot of playing with it. Be looking at the sides where those fins go into the face. It looks like maybe there's a gill pattern going on there. He does have like some of the vessels, like blood vessels, coming up towards the end of the chin. I think that could be interesting, as if you kind of added that sort of pattern going down his neck, where he's ramping up his power because it's starting to rain. And that could even be some of the striations that you take down his arm. It's like he's like a bodybuilder and he's got like those heavy veins that are kind of going down his arm now. And it makes him a little more, just a little gross about it. Okay, well, it's 4 o'clock. This was the last one. I'll do a quick recap for those interested in the art challenge. Then we'll wrap up the stream. So the new challenge coming out for tomorrow. Tickets will, let's see. I think people used to go into the Gumroad store. No, because It's like, do I put it in the new store or do I put it in the Gumroad store? I might as well do it on the new site. Eventually, we're going to have to move to the new site. So, swatchesart.com, I'll put them out there. And you'll choose between a couple of different MTG themes, either two different artifacts. You'll do one of the artifacts or one of the elementals. We have the Horn of Sorrows, which is like a announcement trumpet sort of horn, dark material, old, a very somber item artifact. The other one is Thaden's Puzzle Box, which is a complex, shiny brass box that is from the viewpoint of a person trying to solve it. So you see the two hands there manipulating this thing. Or you can choose between the elementals, the Horrorine Sentinel, which is a gothic, undead earth elemental, and from the plane of Innistrad, or you can do the Sentinel of the Fathoms, which is from the set of Theros, and it is like a Grecian mythology, and it is made of water and plants, and it has like bright brass armor, that sort of thing. But this will be available. 12 tickets will go up tomorrow, 6 in the morning, 6 in the evening. Oh, or I might just put them all up in the morning because I probably have something going on in the evening. We'll see. I'll have to decide on that. But they'll be at swatchesart.com. And that's it, unless you can think of something else. You got anything on them?
No, I think we already talked about everything.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up then. Thank you everybody for joining us, and of course, join us out on Discord. That's where most of the people are being active right now. And feel free to drop your images there, even if it's the ones that we were looking at here right now, and get some feedback from the group. Also, a place to ask for ideas of different classes, resources, that sort of thing. And we do have the next stream is Wednesday, which will be the members only paint over stream. So if you want to join that, make sure you join as a super swatcher here on the channel, and you can submit in your image for possible paint over. And of course, you can go watch the videos in recording there. But that's it for today. Thank you everybody for joining us. Until next time.